It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? I have always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. I've always wanted to live in a neighborhood with you. So let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well say, would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please won't you be my neighbor?
On February 19, 1968, in the same time period as the Vietnam War and Civil Rights Movement, Fred Rogers broke the barrier of children's television by releasing the first episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Children's shows at the time had been numbing children's brains and lacking a lesson or education. Fred taught children that their emotions were manageable and mentionable. President Richard Nixon had proposed reducing funding for programming such as Rogers in half. Rogers spoke out in court on how he believed his job was important and not only won the case but earned $20 million for his show. Rogers produced over 895 episodes on his show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Doing so, he educated, inspired, and nurtured millions of children. This was very revolutionary, especially for its time. Even today, people, especially males, are told to push their feelings down and put up a barrier. Fred Rogers encourages the opposite. Fred would teach children simple things like how to support friends to harder topics of grieving. Although his voice was soft, his messages of how to manage emotions and deal with real problems were loud and clear. Let's take it back to where it all stemmed from, Fred's childhood. As a child, Fred played a lot of piano in an attempt to relieve his emotions when he was breaking down due to bullying, which happened often. This talent later weaved itself onto the show as he would produce over 200 songs. Fred made his own fun by playing and doing voices with his puppets at a young age, which would later adapt on his show. Growing up, Fred would get the same Christmas present every year from his mother, one handmade cardigan sweater. This is why he wore cardigans on his show. Fred had a degree in musical composition from Rollins College, Florida, became an ordained minister of the Presbyterian Church, and worked in the University of Pittsburgh Graduate School of Child Development, where he would later collaborate with Margaret McFarland, a child psychologist, and would incorporate all of these qualities into his show later in life. On February 19, 1968, Fred released his first episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, which aired on PBS. Every day he would start with the same song which he wrote, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, and would teach his audience on lessons mostly revolving around how to manage their emotions. Fred created his show because he noticed a barrier that television for children had, which was it didn't teach values. He said, I got into television because I saw people throwing pies at each other's faces, and that to me was such a demeaning behavior. And if there's anything that bothers me, it's one person demeaning another, he confessed to Amy Hollingsworth, author of The Simple Faith of Mr. Rogers. When Rogers made his show to educate children, some new shows emerged from this now broken barrier as they were inspired to teach children. This was such a revolutionary idea that people were quick to judge him. Critics had written rumors of Fred being gay, which at the time wasn't something people were proud of and were often made fun of if they were gay. They tried to use the word gay as an adjective for weak and symbolically trying to put up a barrier between Fred and the world. Elliot Davey responded with, Fred is one of the strongest people I have ever met in my life. So if they are saying he's gay because he's a surrogate for saying that he's weak, that's not right because he's incredibly strong. In fact, Rogers didn't touch on his sexuality much, but he did say, well, you know, I must be right smack in the middle because I have found women attractive and I have found men attractive. Even just saying such a soft-spoken sentence, Fred had broken the barrier of how sexuality is a terrifying thing to talk about. On May 9, 1969, Fred Rogers aired a very important episode. It addressed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The act stated that there would no longer be segregated pools, but that clearly didn't stop violent acts. Most white people at the time believed that they would catch a disease from African American and that women would be raped by African American men. There was a protest against segregated pools in St. Augustine, Florida, trying to break that barrier. At the protest, whites and African Americans were swimming in a pool and acid was poured in to stop the protests. Fortunately, the acid had diluted as it entered the pool and no one was harmed. Rogers decided to call this barrier between races out by producing an episode where he had Officer Clemens, an African-American policeman, cool off his feet in his wading water with him. This showed that both races should be able to be in the same pool. In September 1971, Robert McNeil and Sandra Vandercoor, both known liberals, would anchor a new public broadcasting service television program named The Washington Week. President Nixon, a Republican, requested that all funds for public broadcasting be cut immediately. This included Rogers' show. His show was going to get funding of $10 million if he lost the case in Washington. Rogers said in court,
And I feel that if we in public television can only make it clear that feelings are mentionable and manageable, we will have done a great service for mental health.
After the case, the judge admitted he was a hard person to sway over, but at the end gave Rogers $20 million of funding for his television show. So Rogers continued to show the world what good can be done through television and simply being kind to one another. In 1993, Fred broadcasted another episode with Officer Clemens when it was known that Clemens was openly gay. Although they never stated that on the show, Fred not only shared the wading water with him, but washed Clemens' feet. Anyone that knew Clemens off the show knew he was gay, as he had come out of the closet. It's a true statement of how anyone is accepted in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. In 2007, Fox and Friends, a morning show on Fox News Channel, claimed that Fred Rogers instilled a belief in his youthful audience that they were special for just being who you are, and hard work was not required in the real world, and became a generation of selfish brats. Fred Rogers was, according to Fox and Friends, the root of all our problems. The host of Fox and Friends had one source to support their cruel idea, and it was from Don Chance, a Louisiana State University professor, who neither possessed an academic background in psychology or sociology. He responded to Fox and Friends' claim on Rogers with this: I made a casual observation that we have a society full of people who think they're entitled to things they haven't earned. The reference to Rogers was just a metaphor. As the article says, he is representative of a culture of excessive dotting, but he is not the problem itself. That said, it is just an observation. I have no professional qualifications to evaluate the real problems or purpose solutions. Mr. Rogers was a great American. The point of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was to teach children. That was the heart and soul of his show, and why he even got into children's television. Yes, he taught children they were special, but he never said they never had to work hard. He broke a barrier for children and adults that felt they didn't deserve love. Fred told everyone they are loved. That's what he taught. Millions of lives changed, including the youth of today, because of Fred Rogers. He educated children on difficult subjects that adults even struggled with, such as death, divorce, racism, assassination, and even the attacks of 9/11. When he started helping others deal with their emotions on live television, more broadcasts were inspired to do something similar. He assured people it's okay to be other than happy and how to manage those feelings. Rogers made an effort to help everyone feel special and loved by him. From responding to every letter of fan mail personally, telling his friends he loves them by saying 143, which stood for the numbers of letters in the words I love you, and having a moment of silence to think of those who helped us while accepting an award. Francois Clemens, a reoccurring actor on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, didn't understand Fred's message at first. He said,
We made eye contact, and he said, I like you just the way you are. You make every day a special day, and I like you just the way you are. And something inside of me turned on, like it's turning on right now. And I thought, he's talking to me. No man had ever told me he loved me, and he did. And I knew he meant it. I knew he meant it.
Fred Rogers passed away on February 27, 2003 from stomach cancer, but his legacy in the neighborhood still lives on. PBS thought his show was so impactful that they made another show similar to Fred's called Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, which is a show based on a puppet Fred Rogers voiced on his own show. Aren't you glad you took the trolley to his neighborhood?
I hope that you'll remember, even when you're feeling blue, that it's you I like, it's you yourself, it's you, it's you we like.